Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I'm back in the darkroom again, and this time I'm going to be answering, or hopefully answering, a few comments and a few private messages that I've had from some of my subscribers and also from non-subscribers as well. Please subscribe if you like this video. And basically they're getting into film photography. They've got their darkroom and they've got their equipment, and they just need a little bit of help in making their first print. So that's what this video is going to be about, is making your first print, from taking your negatives, putting them into the negative carrier, making a contact print, etc, etc, making test strips and coming out with your very first print. So let's get started. I'll show you some of the equipment that I use and some of the basic stuff that we can use to make our very first print in the darkroom. Okay, so if you're at the stage already where you've got your camera and you've got your film and you're shooting and you're developing, but you haven't quite got round to the printing side of it yet, maybe you're scanning your images onto the computer, or you're just saving your negatives for a rainy day until you do get your darkroom, this is some of the basic stuff that I've got that I'm going to be using today in my darkroom for this demonstration. You know, you're not going to be going for massive paper. This is Ilford's 10 by 8 paper. And it's actually an empty box because I've run out of 10 by 8 as well. I'm going to be using for this demonstration a couple of sheets of my 16 by 12. Bit of a waste, but it's not, because I'm going to cut it into small 5 by 7s just for this demonstration. And it's a gloss multi-grade paper. So we'll put that to one side. So these are my trays for developing. I always have these colour coordinated. Now I know at schools I think it was red for developer and blah blah blah. But I work on my own, so I use black for developing, stop is red and go is green. Makes sense, I can always remember, it's like a traffic light, except there's no orange, never mind. This is a cat litter tray that I use for washing my smaller prints, and I'll show you that in a little bit. I've got a squeegee, a couple of jugs, thermometer, I've got my fixer, my stop bath and my developer. And I've got 3 jugs as well to mix the chemicals. So that's all the wet side of things, including the paper as well. Let's take a spin round now and look at the enlarger. So this is my enlarger. If you've seen my other videos, I'm always rambling on about this. It's the Durst M605. I have got another one which is underneath this shelf, but I can't be bothered to get it out. It's a smaller enlarger. But, you know, it's an enlarger. It projects light onto your paper, and if you can pick up one of these that does 35mm or medium form, whatever you're shooting, they're quite cheap on eBay, etc. And so this is what's going to be projecting our negative image onto our light sensitive paper. This is the focusing knob here. This sends the enlarger up and down. This is for my contrast filters, and the rest of it is a big gap because I'm going to show you that on the baseboard what we've got. And down here we've got the condenser, which is going to basically magnify the negative onto the paper for me. This is a negative carrier, which I put the negative in. This is my larger lens. This is a focus finder, a pair of gloves to handle my negatives with, and these are my medium format negatives that we're going to be using. So before we start with the wet side of things, we're just going to give the enlarger a little dust. It's not dusty in here, but just in case there's any surplus, this is an anti-static brush, just around the edges there, and just a little bit more on top of the condenser. Stick the condenser in like so, put the negative carrier in, and finally the lens, which goes underneath here and just screws in. And now you can see the enlarger, it's got its guts back inside. There's the condenser, the negative carrier's in there, and you can just see the lens underneath. Almost forgot one more important thing you'll need is a timer for your timing your prints. Now this should come with your enlarger. If not, you can find one online. Just make sure it's compatible with your enlarger, because they do vary. So far, really simple. All I've done is the dry part of it, which is just setting the enlarger up, ready for my printing. So let's tidy this area up first, and we need to first of all mix our chemicals. So the first chemical I'm going to mix up is my developer. Now this is Ilford's warm tone developer, because I've run out of my normal photo speed developer, but this is fine. It still works just as well. And it says I need 1 part developer to 9 parts water. So I've got my measuring jug here. So I'm going to put 900 millilitres of water and then put 100 millilitres of developer into this jug. And that's it. And now I'll store it inside this container. The last thing I'll do is just put a sticker on it, like so, telling me what developer it is and when I put it in there. So now my developer's done, I can put that to one side. Now I need to thoroughly wash these jugs. I've got more jugs, but I'm just going to use these two. I'm going to wash them out, and the next one I'm going to do is the stop bath, and I'm going to do the fixer. Okay, so that's pretty much the boring part over. I've mixed all the chemicals. You can see it's much tidier now. I've got rid of all the jugs, and all of a sudden things are starting to compress and become more workable. I'm not sort of worrying looking at all that equipment before. It was only jugs and chemicals, but now they're inside their containers. You can see I've labelled the containers. So this is my developer, my stop bath, my fixer. There's my 3 trays. There's one there for the wash as well. And I'm now ready to get on with the dry stuff and make my first contact print. So the next thing you want to do is make a contact sheet of your negatives. Now, basically this involves laying all the negatives down on a piece of photographic paper, putting some glass on top and exposing light straight through, so you get small images, small positive images of the photographs that you've taken. And this is quite handy because you can look at that contact sheet and you can see which images are going to work for you, which ones are underexposed, which ones are overexposed. It's also good to show clients as well. Another side of it, it can also show you how well you're getting on with your photography. You know, if you keep making contact sheets and they always look underexposed or they're overexposed, you know, you've got a problem with your camera or your shooting techniques. So you know, making a contact sheet is always good practice to do. Not everybody does it. I don't always do it, but I'm going to do it now and show you how I make a contact sheet. Now, setting the enlarger up, what I'm going to be doing is I've got the enlarger up high at the moment, and I'm going to be projecting white light down onto the baseboard to cover a nice area and then be sharp as well. I need to focus it in so it's sharp, and then I'll start making my contact print using this piece of glass. So basically what I'm going to be doing is putting the paper on the baseboard and then the negatives on top, and then the glass over the top of the negatives, and then I'll be doing a test strip to start with. So let's get on with that. Okay, so to make the contact print you'll need your negatives, you need a piece of glass. If you haven't got a contact print machine, which I haven't got and I don't bother with one because this is just as good. A piece of card because we're going to be doing a test strip on it first. And photographic paper. Now obviously this has to be done in the dark with the red light on because the paper's light sensitive. So what you'll be doing is placing your paper down on the baseboard like so, and make sure you're wearing your gloves to handle your negatives, and the negatives will go on the piece of paper emulsion side down like so. Okay, and emulsion side down, that's glossy side up. So when you see the glossy side of the negative, the glossy side faces up, and then you put your glass over the top. Okay, so I'm all ready to make my test strip, and I'm going to do this in increments of 3 seconds. So it'll be 3, 6, 9, 12 and so on. And my larger lens, just stop it down a couple of stops to f8, which is ideal for my contact sheet. First 3 seconds. Six, 9, and the last negative I'll just go up a little bit. 12. Okay, let's develop it and see what we've got. In a minute you'll see the image start to come through now. So I'm just going to now speed the process up, stop and fix, give it a little wash and put it on the board to have a look at. So when I'm looking at the test strip from the contact sheet, I'm not actually looking at the image. So, you know, I'm not sitting there going, well, this is nice and exposed, this is where it should be. I've got to be looking at the rebate of the clear part of the negative, which is here, against the paper as well. You can see this is too light. So let's move up to 6 seconds. Now this one's much better. We've got a darker paper here, and we've also got dark, and there's not much difference between the edge of the negative and the back of the paper. And if we go up further more, which is this area, 3, 6, 9 seconds, you can very hardly, in fact I can't even see a difference between the edge of the negative and the paper. So this is where I'm going to go, 9 seconds, which unfortunately means that my photography on this particular portrait was underexposed. You can see it there. So let's do a contact sheet at 9 seconds and see what we've got. So I'll just lay my negatives emulsion side down onto my paper, put the plate over the top, and make sure that's clean as well before you use that, and set my timer to 9 seconds like we said. Aperture's at f8, and there we go. Done. Let's develop it and see what we've got. And in goes the piece of paper, and I'll leave that in there for a minute, the same as the test strip. I'll just let you watch that come through, then I'll speed the process up. So I'm quite happy with the contact sheet. The edges of the negative, I could just about make a difference between the edge of the negative and the blackness of the exposed paper there. They're very, very close. That tells me that the contact sheet was exposed correctly. And I'm now looking at the photographs, which means they look like they was underexposed, whether that was a development problem or I just underexposed in the camera at the time of the shoot. I can't remember. Anyway, I'll turn the light off now. So by making this contact print, it's given me two things to look at. First of all, I can see that my photographs were underexposed, so I'll have to look out for that next time when I'm doing a shoot. And secondly, it's given me a good reference. So I put these with the negatives, and instantly I can see the positive photographs and choose which one I want to print. Or I can show my nephew and say, hey, which one do you want? He'll probably say none of them. But I'm going to go with this one because this shows his character more. So let's get on with the rest of the darkroom session, and we're going to make a print of Jack, this one here. So that's my contact sheet done. It's given me a good reference of my negatives. I've chosen my photograph and I'm going to be printing it in a moment. There's two things I forgot about the equipment side of things at the start, and that's the red light behind me. You need to get a good safe light for your darkroom, and also some tongs. I'm now going to be putting my negative inside the negative carrier, putting it in the enlarger, getting the paper out, making a print. Let's see how we get on. Okay, so I'm going to put the negative into the negative carrier. And do this very gently, guys. You don't want to scratch your negative. I've done it plenty of times, and it really is disappointing when you go back to a negative print and you've made a scratch on it. Just anti-static brush, just to lightly go over the top and the bottom, get any dust off. So the last thing you want is dust on your neg. That looks good, and carefully place it in. Don't slam it in, just in case you do lift dust off the enlarger onto the negative. Okay, gloves off, don't need them. So one more thing we need for the dry area of the darkroom is your easel. I've shown this before in different videos, but if you haven't seen any of my videos before, this does 10 by 8s, does 5 by 7s, I don't know what that is, a 3 by something, 3 by 5, and a smaller one as well. We're interested in this, which is the 5 by 7. So I'm going to have to do this in the dark because I can't see my baseboard, but basically I'm going to drop the enlarger head down, and then using this and the bellows start to focus in and get a nice sharp focus. Now to do that I'm going to need to use my focus finder, and this is my focus finder here. Now the light comes down through the negative, through this little glass onto a mirror, and the image comes up on this little area here. And I will use a piece of paper. Now this paper represents the same thickness of the paper I'm going to use, so it makes sense to put that on there and my focus finder on top. That way I know I'm going to get a very sharp focus. Okay, so let's turn the lights off now, turn the enlarger on and start making. I need to open the aperture as wide as I can open, which is f4 on this lens. And you can see the image projected there. It's upside down, guys, I'm sorry about that. Okay, so I'm now just focusing in. You can see the image projecting onto the baseboard there. Just trying to get, and I can use my easel because the paper will be in there. It's not in there at the moment, obviously, but it will be soon. And I'm just making sure I've got the right composition on this portrait before I make a print. About there. Next thing I need to do is use my focus finder to get the sharpness. So I'll put my paper on there. So I'm just looking for, really I'm going to look around this area just to see if I've got hairs very sharp. And they're sharp enough for me just there. That's good. Okay, so far so good. I've got the negative on the enlarger sitting inside the carrier. The image has already been projected onto the baseboard, and I've used the easel to make a composition of my image. As you saw me turning it and moving it around to make sure that everything's straight and exactly where I want it to be printed. And I've used my focus finder to make sure that I've got a nice sharp focus. The next thing is to be making a print. Now before I do make a print, I want to make a test strip first. Now the idea of a test strip is to make sure that I've got the correct exposure times on the enlarger before I use or waste any paper. So let's get on with making a test strip, and I'll show you how to do that. I'll just show you this while the lights are on. This is going to be my example test strip. It's just an old test strip that I used, but I'm going to use the reverse side to give you an example. And this test strip was cut from the paper that I'm going to be using for the print, so I know it's exactly the same paper, the same weight and everything. So my test strip is going to give me the results that I need to expose my my master print from. So let's put the test strip there, and I'm going to use a piece of card. Now the aperture was set at f4 because I wanted as much light as possible on the baseboard, so that I could get a sharpness and get my composition right, basically so I could see the image while I was working on it before printing. So I usually close mine down to about f11 and f8, but in this particular instance I'm going to use f11. So my enlarger says f4, just need to close that down. I'm going to go to f11. And then what I'm going to do is increments of 3 seconds. So I'm going to turn the enlarger on for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's my little tiny test strip there. And off we go. 3 seconds. Cover. 6 seconds. 9 seconds. 12 seconds. Okay, I'm going to go for 12 seconds on the test strip, develop it, see what it looks like. And it goes to the developer. And I'll leave that in there for about a minute, and then I'll put it into the stop bath for about 30 seconds and into the fixer for about another minute. Now this test strip may seem small to view on the video, but I make these smaller test strips just to save paper. And from this I can see, excuse me, from where I want to go. So I've got 3, 6, 9, 12 seconds. 12 seconds is too dark. 9 seconds is too dark. 6 seconds is okay, but 3 seconds is too bright, too light. I'm looking at the tattoo area here. So I'm going to kind of come somewhere in between these two. I'm going to go for 5 seconds and make a 5x7 print at 5 seconds. Okay, so open the easel, put my paper in, and this is the exciting part. You know, making your first print, it should be, you should have a real feeling of excitement doing it. And, you know, I still do. I still get excited when I'm making prints and see if they come out well. Okay, let's do this for 5 seconds. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's put it in the developer. And in it goes. And you'll start to see it come through. Now these developers are still at 20 degrees, I just checked them, which means this, in my darkroom, it's room temperature. So they haven't increased in temperature, they haven't decreased in temperature. But it's always a good job just to check your chemical temperature after you've been sitting there doing test prints and whatnot. Just so your final print, that you know that your chemicals are going to be working well for you. I'm going to speed this process up. Okay, so that's been in there for a minute. Let's use the tongs. Just drip off as much of the developer as you can before you put it in the stop. Just a little wiggle into the stop bath, and just rinse my tongs in there for about 30 seconds, and the same again, just let it all drip off. Into the fixer. Wash my tongs again. Okay, so it's been in there fixing now for about a minute. I'm safe to turn the lights on because the paper is now no longer light sensitive. And there's our print. time to get it washed. There's a couple of ways you can wash your resin coated prints. I'm not talking about fibre here. These are plastic, basically plastic paper. And this is just clean, fresh water. And you can leave it under there for a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, and it will be ready to hang and dry. Or another way to wash your resin prints, if you don't want to waste water, is just put it into you can have 2 of these trays if you like. This is clean fresh water. It's different from the video I just showed you a second ago. Get the chemicals off, most of them, and then put it into the fresh water there and leave that in there for about 5 minutes. And then once it's been in there for 5 minutes, just take it out, give it a little rinse under the tap. Make sure you do the back. And that's it. Okay, so the next part, you don't need to do this, but I always do. I'll just put my print up here and just lightly get any surplus water off, like so, before drying. And it's ready to dry. So for drying, I use these little tiny small pegs, these small prints, just clip it there. That'll be dry within about 20 minutes. And there you have it, that's our final print. It's a nice print, it's a photograph, you know, that's where we're going here, is making our first photograph. There's all sorts of trickery I could do with this if I really wanted to, but I don't want to. Sometimes I just like to print and leave it as is. You know, that's what I did in the darkroom, and that's what I've got. Anyway, guys, hopefully I've answered your questions about darkroom printing. From the start of the video, I showed you the wet side of the darkroom, from mixing the chemicals to the developing trays, the squeegee, the washing, and the dry side with the enlarger, the negative carriers, etc. And then onto the printing side of it, making a contact sheet, doing test strips, and then coming out with the final print. This is my nephew Jack. That's Jack there. I'm not going to sit there now for a month of Sundays and start dodging and burning certain parts and making it wowzers and what have you. It's a portrait at the end of the day. I'm happy with it. I'm not going to waste any more paper. So if at the moment you're into film photography and you're developing your own negatives and you're scanning them on a computer because you haven't got a darkroom, just remember, you know, all this stuff is second hand and it's cheap to get online. And you don't have to have a darkroom. I'm in a shed, you know, I'm in a shed. But I used to be in my bathroom until my wife kicked me out. You know, it's just a small room, as long as it's dark and light tight, and you've got your enlarger, you've got your developing trays and your chemicals and your paper, you're on your way to doing some really good prints. So good luck with that, guys. Please like the video, subscribe. I hope it's helped, and I'll catch you next time.